All right, Learn Jazz Live. I'm here with an amazing guest speaker here, amazing musician, amazing educator, someone who I look up to as a great educator, has a great podcast, 10-minute jazz listen podcast, amazing courses, and that is our friend Nick Mainella here. So, Nick, thank you for your workshop. Thank you for being here at Learn Jazz Live.
Oh, thank you so much for having me yet again this year. I checked out a few of the other presentations today and just what a fantastic day. So just really honored to be here again, be a part of it. And thank you for all those kind words, Brent. Right back at you.
Yeah, I mean, my workshop was your favorite one, right?
Of course. Of
Of
course,
course,
it
yeah,
always
okay.
is.
I just wanted to clear that up, just really before we continued.
You know,
Um,
that's a given.
that's a get right, of course. All right. So, first question is from Scott. Scott's asking, what context do you solo using the modes? Is it where you are doing really fast runs? Can you give some examples of incorporating them into a solo? And he added, like, say, in Cherokee or a really fast swing tune.
Yeah, so that's a really great question. I don't really think about the modes as being useful for specific situations. Like I'm not reaching for modes when I'm playing at a certain tempo or over a certain set of chord changes. The way that I'm thinking of them is literally it's the parent scale that goes along with the chord. So
Mhm.
I like to have a couple of things available to me, right? So I'll study things like arpeggios with extensions. So that
Mhm.
might be one um, device that's available to me. And then if I want to do something that's a little bit more linear, meaning when I'm playing an arpeggio, everything is generally a third apart, that's going to give me a very specific kind of sound.
Mhm.
And then when I want to reach for something that's a little bit more linear, a little bit more scale based, that's based off of half steps and whole steps, that's where I really need to know the mode behind that arpeggio. So I like to have sort of like two different approaches that I can take no matter what chord I see. One, a scale based approach, and one, a chord based approach.
Mhm.
And that's where I really find the modes useful is I want to be able to do both. And that's going to cover me the best when I'm trying to make something up on the spot, which, as we all know, is the ultimate goal.
Right. Love that. And I think kind of piggybacking off of that question a bit. So, any tips for how to use scales so they don't sound like scales while you're trying to play them? Practice
Yeah.
like,
So
sort of
that
practicing the scales, right? Like your amazing exercises, but then, maybe might fall into some the same linear patterns. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So you do have to be careful of that, right? Because I remember when I first started improvising, my teacher gave me a scale, and my solo was just up the scale, down the scale, up the scale, down the scale. And,
Yeah.
I've heard that thousands of times through my career teaching. So you really do have to be careful of that. One thing that I'll do that I think is very, very handy is once I have my fingers and my ears wrapped around a particular mode, one thing that I really enjoy using are drones, and you can find them on YouTube. They're all over the place. There's apps that will play drones for you. And what I'll do is I'll put on one of those drones and I will just try to come up with interesting melodies.
Mm.
And to go a
Mm.
step further than that, when I'm actually doing that, I'll think about things like don't always start on the root. So I'm
Mm.
going to try to play a melody that starts on the sixth step of whatever mode I'm practicing. And that might not be something that you would normally reach for, but what you might realize when you do an exercise like that is, wow, the six is a really, really interesting departure point. I would have
Mm.
never thought about that unless I was sitting here with this drone methodically practicing things really slowly with no consequences, right?
Mhm.
Because the worst place to experiment with maybe starting in a different part of the scale or whatever is like on stage or at a jam session or something like that. So yeah, try to set some parameters before you start playing whatever melody you're going to play or doing your improvisation, and try to get outside the box, right? If you've never done something before, that's a great reason to do it. And you
Mm.
might decide that, oh, well, that doesn't sound so good. I'm not going to do that again. But at least you tried it and you figured out that, it doesn't sound good. But you'll find a lot of different paths through scales and arpeggios and modes and all that stuff if you simply make it a point to look for them and take a different approach.
Gotcha. It's the spirit of experimentation. And I
Mhm.
think this kind of answers Frank's, but let's just read it and make sure. Is it best to practice the modes over a drone of the original root or each? Oh, okay. It's actually more specific. Over a drone of the original root or each chord. In your first set of exercises, are we practicing the modes over C minor seven, over C major seven, over the yeah, I think you get what
I
he's
think
trying
I
to say.
see what he's saying. So, yes, I would practice it over each of those individual chords,
Okay.
right? So, if you're practicing the modes of a C major scale, start with the first mode and do it behind a C major seven chord or a C6 chord or a regular old C major triad. And then when you feel like you have a handle on that and you know what's going on, then move on to D minor seven and actually practice that over. Like if you're sitting down at the piano, put down the sustain pedal, plunk out that D minor seven chord, and then practice that second
Mhm.
mode. I hope that's what he's asking.
I think that is, yeah,
Okay.
that's excellent clarification. So Mark Andre is asking, really interesting. Do you think knowing the modes by intervals, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc., is good instead of seeing it as a key signature change?
Absolutely. And that's the way that my brain works. So I do think it's important to realize, like, for instance, if you're playing a mode of the major scale, I do think it's useful information for you to know what major scale you're referencing by the key signature. But
Hmm.
the way that my brain works is exactly what you were saying. So if I'm thinking Lydian, what I am thinking in my head is, 1, 2, 3, sharp 4, 5, 6, 7. And I think that'll probably be different for everybody. I feel like it's a good like theoretical thing to know to be able to
Yeah,
go, okay, A flat Lydian is part of E flat major. But when I'm on the fly and I'm trying to put something together in my head, I do think in terms of like the actual mode that I'm playing.
got you. And let me ask a clarifying question. I think that I hear a lot from people. So when you're improvising, are you thinking about the different notes, or are you thinking even about what the next mode is you could play, or is it more like spontaneous than that, or you've practiced it and you don't think about it? What's kind of how's your vibe on that? How do you work with that?
I think when I'm playing a tune that's very, very familiar, so like if I'm playing, for instance, a standards gig where I know like all the tunes that we're playing today, I know inside and out. I've played them dozens, maybe hundreds of times.
Hmm.
Then I'm not thinking as hard because at that point it's kind of all muscle memory. And I love that because then I'm really allowed to be like spontaneous, right?
Yeah.
Where I kind of know when I see a chord, like my fingers are going to go into the mode of, well, that was an interesting choice of words. Um, my fingers are going to fall in line with
Yeah.
the feeling of that chord because I've practiced it so many times. But let's say like I'm playing with a big band and we're reading charts that I've never seen before and I have a solo section. In that situation, I am actually trying to think as hard as I can. And I'm sure that my solos suffer because of it, but it's a good skill to have. And I hope I can play at least a decent solo while like kind of crunching the numbers in my head, but I try to be as prepared for any situation I'm gonna run into as possible by doing my homework in the practice room, doing all that really extensive work. So at least I have an idea of what I'm trying to do, even if I'm not like 1,000% comfortable.
Yeah. Cool. That's a great answer. Allah asks, would you also focus on the harmonic minor?
So yes, harmonic minor would have been the next scale that I would have presented in the presentation. I just felt like I didn't have enough time, you know what I mean, to get into that scale as well. But yeah, there are some very, very interesting modes in the harmonic minor scale as well. But I would say I would take care of major and melodic minor first because again, like I said in the
Mhm.
presentation, they're just so useful to you as like an everyday thing. Those
Mhm.
chord qualities and those modes are going to be things that you're literally going to see every day.
Yeah. Can you maybe quickly, can you give us maybe application of harmonic minor off the top of your head?
Let me think. So a very interesting one would be I mentioned the minor major seven chord
Hmm.
in the as the first mode of melodic minor. So an interesting sort of variation of that would be to make it a harmonic minor scale. So instead of playing that natural six, now you're playing that flat six. And again, this is the beauty of jazz, right? I could say, okay, when you see a minor major seven chord, use melodic minor. But then somebody else might come along, another teacher or another player might say, oh, I always use harmonic minor when I
Mm,
see that particular chord.
yeah.
Um, so experimenting with even something as simple as that, like changing the parent scale between melodic minor, harmonic minor, will give you some new ideas,
Mm,
some new sounds. If you're writing, that's a great time to,
mm.
experiment with that sound.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. No, I love that. So harmonic mind. So we have to talk to whoever's putting this summit on, making like limitations to these workshops. Good grief. Um, Lewis asks, when viewing a minor 251, I noticed the five is usually associated with a sharp five and a sharp nine. Any reason why? Why?
Yeah, so sharp five and sharp nine both to me say altered, right?
Yeah.
That's what comes into my mind uh, first, right? And we talked about the altered chord in the melodic minor section being, the seventh
Mhm.
mode of a melodic minor scale. So if you look inside that scale, you get both that, you get flat nine, you get sharp nine, you get sharp 11, and you get sharp five slash flat six. And I think that the reason you will see that in a minor 2-5 is that a minor 2-5 tends to be much more tense
Mm.
than a major 2-5, and you could still put all those tensions into a major 2-5 if you want to, but when you're resolving to that minor key, um, most of the time people will really really load up on the tension, and there's no more tense chord as far as a five chord goes than that altered sound.
Right. Yeah, it's all well, so flat 9, right, as well can
Mhm.
be in there. I mean, so flat
Yep,
13.
exactly.
Dominant 7 chord is a great chord because you can do
Yeah,
so many amazing things with it. You can get geek out on that all day long. How many
yeah, there's
different ways can I figure out how to resolve a 5 or a dominant 7th chord to a, diatonic chord or like whatever it's resolving to?
yeah, there's
Um,
kind of like I almost think about it like there's no rules when you're playing over a five chord, as
yeah,
long as you've like thought it out and you're being intentional. You can kind of do whatever you want to do as long as when that one chord comes around, you resolve it.
right, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. Don't get caught, out in the dark. Just get
exactly.
inside.
If you listen to somebody like one of my favorite saxophone players in the universe, George Garzone,
Mhm.
if you try to figure out sometimes what he's doing over a five chord, like good luck. But when you hear it, it's amazing because he always drops back in on beat one, and ah, you get that
Yeah.
release.
Yeah, I was joking with you, Nick, before we got on the stream for you to tell me what the secret to jazz was. Looks like we just found out. You can play
There
whatever
it
you
is.
want, just resolve it. And you're so secret
There
to
it is.
jazz
We're
unveiled
done
on.
here.
Yeah, we're done. All right, end of stream. um, got your money's worth. Okay. Let's see. Next question. Michelle asks, in classical melodic minor, the sixth and seventh notes are lowered descending. In jazz, it seems they stay raised. Your descending melodic minor arpeggios have six and seven still raised, right?
Yes, absolutely. And the reason is when you're playing over chord changes, they do not change whether you are playing ascending or descending,
Hmm.
right? So we like to use the same form because the rhythm section, unless they're like amazing, is not going to make that distinction. Um, so that's why we don't use that classical practice of different on the way up than on the way down. And bonus, it makes it a little bit easier to practice because you don't have to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I feel like jazz theory versus like jazz theory is like the the younger brother who keeps, getting into trouble and, getting
Exactly.
caught partying late at night, but the classical is like, in line. So yeah, that's
Yep.
how it goes. Walter asks, would you practice by adding one passing note to each scale, like a bebop scale, to create more symmetrical phrases?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And if you really dive into the different forms of the bebop scale, the only thing you have to watch out for is that on some of the modes, the passing tone will be in a different place than others. So,
Hmm.
like a good concrete example is when I'm playing over a dominant chord, of course, I put the passing tone between the root and the flat seven. I'll put the major seven in there. But when I'm playing over a major seven chord, I'll put the passing tone in between the six and the five, right?
Okay.
And it's just a much more desirable sound, at least to my ears. And that's what my teachers throughout the years have taught me. So you just have to be careful. I'm a big fan of chromaticism.
Yeah.
Um, it's really going to add so much richness and interest to your playing, but really think about where you want to put that chromatic note in the scale, because you might be surprised. It's not always going to be between the root and the seven.
Got you. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. That's helpful. Kimberly asks, could you say more about a dominant seventh alt, spelling without color? I used to think alt just meant alter it however you like.
Okay. Yeah. And I had no idea what an altered chord was for
Yeah,
like a lot of my life as an improviser.
me too. Me too. I would see that and I'd be like, I don't know what that means. Yeah,
And it was bad too, because I'd be playing like, natural nine, or I'd be playing, a regular five and be like, what?
yeah,
This sounds absolutely
yeah.
awful. And I thought I was being safe, but I was really just sounding
You were
terrible.
being unsafe. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Little did I know it was all the notes that don't fit that make the altered chord what it is, right?
Yep. Yep.
So I'm wondering what Kimberly's asking about spelling without color. You can spell a an altered chord the regular way, except you just have to watch out for the five, because there is no natural five in an altered chord. So you can still play one, obviously. You can play the major third, that's
Mhm.
in there, and you can play the flat seven. If you
Mhm.
want to use a five when you're spelling that basic spelling of the chord, use that sharp five.
Yeah, because you can use the guide tones, right? The guide tone, the thirds and the sevenths, they stay the same. The
Exactly.
root obviously stays the same. So I guess maybe what she could be asking is what are if we were to stack it, right?
Okay.
I know she's a guitar player. We don't always
Mhm.
think about stacking notes, but if you
Right.
could stack it, like what would you say are all the notes in there?
So I would go one, three, sharp five, flat seven, and then I would go flat nine, sharp 11.
Got you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Or the other option would be to go one, three, jump all the way up to seven, just skip five entirely. And then you could do flat nine, sharp 11, sharp five. And that would actually give you a pretty different sound depending on which one of those variations you did. But I think they're both acceptable.
Yeah. And I'll say for Kimberly, because I know she's a guitar player, is like, you don't have to play every single altered note
Right.
within the chord. You don't have to play every single alteration. So that's
Mhm.
where maybe some of that alter it however you like actually is sort of true. Like, I mean, you don't have to like so a lot of times I when I think of an altered chord, I'm not always putting in the sharp 11.
Right. Right.
Sometimes if that's what
Yep.
I'm going for.
Yep.
But like, you can choose like, oh, I want to put the flat 9 and the flat 13 in there or like
Right.
whatever, right? I mean, so but that's the technical theoretical what an altered chord is.
Yeah,
Very well
and
described.
that's a really good example, Brent, because when I think about an altered chord, I think about the note sharp nine. So a lot of times, what I'm doing if I'm playing the voicing is I'll leave out the flat nine, right?
Got you.
Because when I'm playing over a dominant seven flat nine chord, um, always I'll have the flat nine in there because that's like that distinct sound.
Right.
When I hear a sharp nine voicing, my brain goes, "This is altered, most likely."
Yeah.
So that's another example of what you were saying.
Yeah. I agree with that. That's interesting because I actually sort of I don't know why I sort of think the same way. I'm like
Mm,
a flat 9 it isn't an altered. You could have a flat 9 and altered chord, but when I really think of altered, I'm like, at least the voicings as a guitar player that I play, there's like it's
Yep,
flat 13, it's sharp 9. Those are
exactly.
the ones that I just go to automatically if I'm picking and choosing. Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah, cool, cool, cool. I like this. Here's a question I've been well, let's do one more question.
Sure.
Quick question. We're a little over time, but having too much fun. So one question I've been asking a lot of the speakers, what would you say is the structure to a balanced practice session
Mm.
for you?
Very, very deep question there.
Yeah, I guess
That's
it's not
one of
really
the
like a
ones.
quick answer question, but
Yeah,
that's why you're
but
a
that's
pro.
okay. I mean, I can give you a quick kind of overview of what I've realized over the years. Um, for me, the biggest part of it is that I want to be doing the most difficult things, the things that are stretching me the furthest, requiring the most amount of brain cells and brain power when I'm the freshest,
Okay.
right? So for me, what that looks like is a short warm up for my instrument's sake. And then I usually will immediately dive into the heaviest stuff that I want to get done that day.
Got you.
Um, because I know that my brain power is going to drop off rather quickly, right? Like I can only concentrate for so long. And now, being a dad, oh my gosh, having a baby, like that is the most important thing because I'm always tired. I'm exhausted. I don't have that brain power that I used to have when I was like really well rested and had unlimited time. So I'm always going to try to get the biggest thing done. And then I won't be as upset if I'm like, you know what, I'm too tired to get anything else done today. At least I got that big thing on my list. I
I
got a
love that.
little bit of work in on that.
That's actually a good, we have not heard that answer yet. That's a great answer. I love that because when we talk about like really wanting to improve and improve quicker, because we're always wanting to improve quicker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Making sure that we are hitting those challenge points when we have that capacity is so important. So that's a great tip. Love it, Nick. This has
Yeah.
been such a great Q&A. What a wonderful masterclass. Guys, the PDF that Nick has for you is something you can keep with you forever. Print it out or put in your folder on your computer if that's works best for you, whatever. Keep it with you and take action on it. So thank you, Nick, again. Appreciate you. We are headed to our very final workshop for Learn Jazz Live, which excited about, of course. We have Brendan Lau from Jazz Piano School starting his workshop right now. 9 levels to improvisation mastery. Really great one. And then we'll have our last Q&A of the Learn Jazz Live 2022 at 5:40. So I hope to see all you there, loaded with your questions, and appreciate it. Again, Nick, thank you. And we'll see
Thank you,
you
Brent.
all at the next one.